The distress beacon from Callaway's Rest arrived as a ghost 17 hours of signal decay had stripped it down to raw data and silence. Senior Commander Mira Okafor stood before the projection wall in the Helix Directorate's Situation Chamber, watching footage she would never be able to unsee. The colony had been home to 19,000 souls, families who had traded the noise of Earth's megacities for open skies and red soil. Farmers, engineers, teachers, people who had carried hope like cargo across 4 light years of empty dark. The Sirath Dominion had swept through in 4 hours. The footage was clinical in its horror, captured by autonomous survey drones that had been too small and too quiet to notice or destroy. There were no last stands, no military targets. The Sirath hadn't come for the colony's mineral rights or its orbital platform. They had come to make a point, and the point was written in fire across 17,000 hectares of settlement grid. Among the dead, 6,200 children. Okafor had a daughter. She was 9 years old, currently asleep in their home on the Kenyan Plateau, 6 light years from here. She made herself watch every second of the footage. Beside her, Liaison Director Tomas Reyes exhaled slowly through his nose, the breath of a man who had spent 30 years in diplomatic chambers learning to keep his composure. Today it cost him more than it ever had. The Sirath ambassador, he said at last, has filed a formal statement. They're calling it a Times Boundary Clarification Action. The silence that followed lasted a long time. When humanity had first broken the lightspeed barrier, not elegantly, not heroically, but with a prototype drive that nearly took half of Jupiter's upper atmosphere with it, they had stumbled into a galaxy that was old, crowded, and savage. The interstellar community operated on a simple architecture. Size determined safety. Ancient powers had been carving civilizations into territories for longer than humanity had been writing. The Sirath Dominion alone was 14,000 years old. The Conclave of Reth had overseen the destruction of 23 species that had grown times inconvenient. Humanity's early envoys had returned home pale-faced, their reports full of words like times tributary times and times subjugation times and times acceptable losses. The Oversight Council had debated for a decade. The choice they made was not obvious, and it was not easy. They chose restraint. Not weakness restraint. There was a difference, though the rest of the galaxy never grasped it. Earth joined the Galactic Assembly as a cooperative member, accepted punishing trade restrictions, filed formal protests through proper channels when their ships were seized, negotiated quietly when their citizens were imprisoned, absorbed every provocation with measured, documented patience. To the galaxy, humanity looked soft. This was intentional. For while Earth's diplomatic corps filed complaints, another project was underway, one that never appeared in Assembly records, never showed up in external intelligence reports, never once leaked, despite involving hundreds of thousands of people bound by the most solemn oaths their civilization could construct. Humanity had decided that if the day ever came when peace failed completely, they would not be unprepared for what came next. The chamber they used for the vote had no windows and no recording systems. 29 people sat in a ring of plain chairs, no raised dais, no ceremonial trappings. If this decision was going to be made, it would be made face to face, eye to eye, with nothing softened. Director General Priya Santhosh had been in office for 3 years. She had spent most of that time managing trade negotiations and infrastructure disputes. Nothing had prepared her for this. She looked at each face in the ring. Scientists, admirals, ethicists, economists, people who had grandchildren on outer colonies, people who had attended academy with the educators now dead on Callaway's Rest. "I want to hear objections first," she said. "Real ones, not procedural. If someone believes we're about to make a catastrophic mistake, say it now." The room was quiet for almost a full minute. It was Admiral J. Wan Seo who finally spoke. Not an objection, a question. "If we do this, we don't get to go back. Are we certain that's acceptable?" "No," Santhosh said. But the question is whether doing nothing is more acceptable, and I don't believe it is. The vote carried 29-0. Within the hour, a signal went out to every human settlement, station, and vessel in the known galaxy. The language was precise and unadorned. All human nationals are directed to return to sovereign space within 60 hours. Upon expiry of this window, the Helix Directorate will implement Contingency Aegis. No non-human vessel will be permitted within 90 light-years of Sol without explicit authorization. Unauthorized approach will be met with immediate termination of the vessel. This is not subject to negotiation or appeal. The Sirath Dominion's response came within hours. Grand Sovereign Veth Kanar, 3 meters tall, his exoskeletal armor scrolled with the sigils of 14 conquered systems, appeared on every assembly channel with the particular amusement of someone who has never, in 14,000 years of institutional memory, been surprised. The human creatures have produced a statement, he said. The translator rendered his resonance clicks into something almost musical, endearing. They will remember it fondly when they are kneeling. The warrior species of the Korath Belt circulated the human ultimatum as comedy, a social equivalent of a child shaking a fist at a thunderstorm. The merchant guilds ran projections on how long it would take economic pressure to force a human capitulation. The consensus was 11 days. Every species with eyes on Earth had the same model of human capability in mind. A small patrol fleet, a handful of research stations, some mining infrastructure, a civilization that had never fought a real war against a peer adversary, cautious, restrained, toothless. They were right about everything except the last part. Deep beneath 3 mountain ranges, under 2 ocean floors, inside asteroids that scans had always registered as inert rock, something was waking up. Humanity had spent 200 years learning from every species it encountered, studying their weapons, their drives, their materials science, filing everything, improving everything. Building, quietly, in the places no one thought to look. The facilities were enormous. They had to be, to house what was inside them. When the first berth doors opened beneath the Mariana Basin, the vessel that rose from it was 4.2 kilometers long. Not because the size was militarily necessary, but because the systems it needed to carry required the space. 17 more like it followed within 12 hours. Commander Okafor boarded her ship Times. Unmoved Times was its name. A choice made 3 decades ago by the engineer who designed its keel and watched the rest of the fleet materialize around her through the observation array. She thought about Calloway's Rest. She thought about 6,200 children. Then she set her hands on the command console and spoke the activation phrase that had been waiting 200 years to be used. The patience is over. The Sirith battle group arrived at the edge of Sol's influence in the traditional formation of a Dominion punitive fleet. A killing crescent, designed to maximize psychological impact as much as tactical effect. 240 warships, each one a monument to 14 millennia of military refinement. Fleet Blade Osirith, commanding from the carrier times absolute dominion, had destroyed 11 civilizations. He considered this a 12th, and a minor one. He opened a channel. Humans, your ultimatum was noted. Your fleet has been observed. You have, by my count, deployed approximately 2,000 vessels, which suggests either remarkable confidence or remarkable ignorance. I suspect the latter. Surrender your command authority to the Sirath Dominion, and your people will serve. Resist, and you will not. The response came from Commander Okafor. Her voice was quiet. Not the quiet of fear, something else. The kind of quiet that exists on the far side of grief. Fleetblade Osirith, you were warned. I want you to know I mean that sincerely. You were given a clear warning, and we gave it in good faith, because we are not cruel. That was the last warning any Sirath vessel will ever receive. If you turn your fleet around in the next 90 seconds, this ends here. Osireth's mandibles moved in an expression his species used to indicate contemptuous disbelief. He did not turn his fleet around. What followed was not a battle. A battle implies two forces in contest. What the Sirith fleet experienced was something for which their 14,000 years of military history had no category. Human weapons did not fire projectiles or beams. They times redefined local physics. The Sirath ships were not targeted. The times space they occupied times was targeted. Gravity wells of crushing specificity materialized around dreadnoughts, folding them inward. Electromagnetic constants shifted in isolated bubbles, and the atomic bonds holding alloys together simply stopped working. Time dilation fields aged crew to dust in seconds, leaving their vessels to drift in perfect, terrible silence. The Sirath did not die fighting. They died confused. 14 minutes after the engagement began, 239 warships had been removed from existence. The Time's absolute dominion times floated alone, held gently in a containment field it had no instruments to detect. Osirith stared at his tactical display. It was completely blank. Okafor appeared on his screen. "You are alive because I decided you should be," she said. "That decision took me 4 seconds to make. I want you to think about what that means on your way home. You will carry a message to your Grand Sovereign. Tell him that humanity has spent 200 years making a choice. Every weapon you just saw, we built it, tested it, and put it away. We chose not to use it. We chose to believe that something better was possible." She paused. "The children of Calloway's Rest died for that belief. We won't be making it again. Any Sirith vessel that enters human space will be destroyed. Any attack on a human citizen will result in the complete dissolution of the responsible government's military capacity. Any further massacre of any species that we have the power to prevent, we will prevent. We're not interested in ruling you. We're not interested in your territory. We are interested in never watching footage like what came out of Calloway's Rest again. Those are our terms. They are not negotiable. Go." The containment field released. Osirith ran. The Sirath Dominion lasted 19 more days. It did not fall to human assault. It fell to itself, to the 47 subjugated species who, upon learning that the Grand Sovereign's armada no longer existed, made calculations of their own. Grand Sovereign Veth Kanar fled his own capital ahead of the civilizations he had spent centuries grinding underfoot. His throne was occupied, briefly, by a council of the liberated, who promptly sent Earth a message asking whether humanity had any objection to self-determination. "None whatsoever," Earth replied. Other powers recalibrated quickly. The Reth Conclave, which had been quietly planning to annex 3 human research systems, withdrew its assets within 48 hours and sent a diplomatic mission with a tone that could generously be described as newly respectful. The Korath Belt warrior clans, whose mockery of humanity's ultimatum had been loudest, fell silent so completely that the silence was its own kind of message. The Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. Humanity attended. Director General Santosh addressed the chamber from a simple podium, without ceremony, without theater. "We know what you're afraid of," she said. "You're afraid that we've decided to become what we spent 200 years resisting. I want to be honest with you. Some of us considered it. It would be easy. We have the capability." She let that settle. "We didn't choose restraint originally because we were weak. We chose it because we understood something that seems to be poorly understood in this room. The species that builds the biggest weapon doesn't win history. They just determine what the next species has to build to survive them. We didn't want to be part of that cycle. We still don't. But we will no longer absorb massacres as the cost of our principles. Those who want to trade, to share knowledge, to build something in this galaxy that doesn't run on fear, we are ready for that. Those who want to test what we're willing to do to protect our people," she set down her notes. "You've seen the answer." The memorial on Calloway's Rest was rebuilt from the ruins. A single stone wall, stretching half a kilometer, carved with 19,000 names. At the base, in plain letters, without adornment, they believed in something better. They were not wrong to believe it. They were simply the ones who paid for the rest of us to prove it. Species came from across the assembly to read those words. Some came in guilt, some came in curiosity. Some came because they were the children and grandchildren of the subjugated, and they had never had a place like this to stand, a place where someone had finally said, this was not acceptable. And something changed. Humanity kept the fleet, kept the facilities running, kept the research active, kept the capabilities sharp and maintained. They hoped, every day, that they would never use it again. They did not make any more promises about that. The age of easy cruelty was over. What came next was something the galaxy didn't have a word for yet.